Final Fantasy Versus XIII is the most influential game to never release. Although its rough concept and characters would eventually evolve into what became Final Fantasy XV, it's still a vastly different concept than what it was under the direction of its original leadership, and many fans have never let go of Final Fantasy Versus XIII. It's even more insane when you think that Versus XIII was revealed in the summer of 2006. This means that Versus XIII is getting close to being almost 20 years old. 18 years ago to be precise. Just saying that out loud gave me back pain and made me feel like an old man. And if you also felt old hearing that, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as we try to hit 98k and reach 100,000 by the end of the year. But indeed, it is not just the fans that are still holding on to Final Fantasy Versus XIII. No, not just guys who named their channel Night Sky Prince after how inspired they were by those trailers. It's also the developers. Tetsuya Nomura, the creator of Versus XIII and Kingdom Hearts, is well known for holding on to these ideas. First introduced in Kingdom Hearts 3, Verum Rex, a fictional video game that bears incredible similarities to Final Fantasy Versus XIII, first showed up in the Toy Story world. And now with the reveal of Kingdom Hearts 4, the emphasis on Quadratum, the souls of the dead, and many other concepts from Versus XIII, including shot-for-shot recreations of the Versus XIII trailer. Kingdom Hearts is now Final Fantasy Versus XIII. But Nomura isn't the only developer on Final Fantasy Versus XIII that feels this way. This has been made apparent with the announcement of a brand new game, Reynatis, inspired by Final Fantasy Versus XIII, and also has many of the same developers who worked on it. Though to be clear, Square Enix is not involved in developing or publishing this game. The developer is Furyu Corporation. Now in terms of who's working on this project, you are going to hear a lot of familiar names. Immediately, the key visuals and aesthetic will harken back to Versus XIII, and that's because Yusuke Naoda, who also worked on Versus XIII performing a similar role, is now working on this project. But this is more than just skin deep. It's not just the visuals. The game's story is being worked on by Kazushige Nojima. If you're a big Final Fantasy VII fan, you're already familiar with Nojima. However, what you may not know is that Nojima wrote the original script for Final Fantasy Versus XIII, a script that unfortunately got discarded in the transition to 15, and we may never fully know what it was supposed to be. That said, Nomura has said that he could write a full book on what happened with Versus XIII, and he might do it someday, and I really hope that he does, just to solve what is almost a lifelong curiosity for me at this point. Yoko Shimomura will be composing the music for this game. She of course composed the music for the original Final Fantasy Versus XIII, as well as the finished Final Fantasy XV. Key staff aside, you can tell just by looking at this game the Versus inspiration. It takes place in Shibuya, with Insomnia also being inspired by Shinjuku and Shibuya. The protagonist and heroine's designs, as well as many of the shots from the trailers, draw direct inspiration from Final Fantasy Versus XIII, with the protagonist himself also kind of looking like Yozora, who also looks like Noctis. At this point, Noctis is just a genre of characters. Even the music in the reveal trailer is eerily similar to Ominous Lacrima, a track that was commonly used in Final Fantasy Versus XIII trailers, and ended up being a boss theme in the final game of FF15. Since the announcement of this game, people have wondered if Nomura directly approved of this Versus offshoot, and now we have an incredibly strong sign that he does. Back in April, they released an April Fool's joke about the game collaborating with one of Nomura's other projects, Neo: The World Ends With You. After all, both games take place in Shibuya. Seems like it would just make sense. And indeed, the developers thought the same, with them now confirming that the April Fool's joke isn't just a joke anymore. This collaboration is actually happening, with a brand new trailer that showcases Marin confronting multiple noise enemies and using attacks that resemble Twiwi's pin system, as well as the return of familiar characters from Neo who will be accompanying him through this surreal version of Shibuya. You may also spot some recognizable shops from The World Ends With You as well. The big takeaway here is Nomura had to approve of this in order for it to happen, as he is one of the leads on The World Ends With You. Nomura definitely supports this game and wants this collaboration to happen. And the reason is because this is all part of Nomura's bigger plan. A plan that has been in the making for years. A plan that has been slowly building up, which is, I have no idea. But there does seem to appear to be a plan of some sort. Versus is in many of his works now, starting with Kingdom Hearts 3 and Verum Rex. You guys could not imagine how shook I was when I first saw that. And now it seems that Kingdom Hearts 4 leans even deeper into Versus. But what is the actual end goal of all of this? Is he going to turn everything into Versus 13 now, since he wasn't allowed to have the main project? Is this his way of showing people what Versus 13 could have been about? Or is he simply trying to send a message to the higher ups at Square Enix who took him off of the project? Even still, I imagine that was a call made by former CEO Yosuke Matsuda. Since then, Matsuda has stepped down and Kiryu is the dad who stepped up. So it being about something like that, I'm not really sure. I would feel that it's more about the former and wanting him to show fans things from Versus 13 that we spent years being curious about, and he feels that he wasn't able to deliver it because he was taken off of the final product of FF15. The lingering question always becomes, could Versus 13 become its own thing? Of course, this always leads back to, could Versus 13 eventually become its own thing? A Final Fantasy Versus 15. It's not impossible. Just looking at Final Fantasy VII Remake offering its own sort of alternate universe twist, is that still a hot take? Sort of pseudo-sequel thing, whatever you want to look at it. In either case, they are no stranger to revising a piece of their own history. So creating an alternate version of Final Fantasy 15, which, by the way, FF15 did go on to be one of the most successful Final Fantasy games of all time. The third highest selling, by the way. People still have a ton of love for Noctis & Co. and definitely would not mind seeing them again. So I think that revisiting that world, but also having a different set of events happening, wouldn't be too off-brand. However, what I think is more likely is that someday Verum Rex could also become its own thing, a separate independent game that has all of the concepts of Final Fantasy Versus 13 within it, including legally distinct Noctis with legally distinct Stella taking place in legally distinct Insomnia, and perhaps Kingdom Hearts 3 and Kingdom Hearts 4 are a sort of pitch to the audience who still demand Versus 13, and this and Reynatis are a way of keeping Versus 13's memory alive for all of us who has spent 2 decades wondering, waiting, theorizing on what Final Fantasy Versus 13 could have been. If you want to support the channel, be sure to check out my Patreon or become a channel member right here on YouTube with the join button, and I'll see you all in the next video.